I'm getting ready to prep the fabric so that I can hoop 3 tiles at a time and get this stitched out in the multi-needle. So I have a very scientific method here for measuring my fabric. I put my hoop on the fabric. You need like an inch over here or so, just so it sticks up maybe a thumb width on top of the hoop. I've got enough on either end. The idea is I'm going to have enough fabric to come up over the edge of this. And I'm going to take my rotary cutter, and I need to cut it probably right about here. I'm just going to mark it. And I'm going to keep the ruler level on the fabric even with the mark. And that's how I measure how much fabric I need. Now I'm going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to starch it and apply the fusible woven to the back of it. For the fusible woven, I'm going to cut like an 8-inch piece, and this particular roll of stabilizer is 15 inches wide, and it has like a selvage on the end of it right there. So I'll be trimming that off. I need 3 8-inch pieces, and that's going to make sure that the fusible woven is wide enough to capture all of the tiles. There's one. So obviously the fusible woven is not as wide as the fabric, and that is just fine. It's going to be stuck to the back of the fabric, and it doesn't necessarily need to be captured up into the edges of the hoop. Okay. So I'm going to lay all 3 of these together with that little selvage lined up, their little selvage edges just like this. And I'm going to trim these off. I want to make sure that the little edges all have glue on them so that they adhere down. So now I'm going to go starch the back of this, get it all nice and pressed, and then adhere the fusible woven to the back. Okay, I'm just going to spray. This is, I can tell this is the back because the crease of the fabric fold is face down, giving this a nice good soaking with spray starch. It's okay if it flakes a little bit because it's the back. And I'm going to let that sit just a couple of seconds. It may or may not soak down in because of the sizing on the fabric. So I'm going to start in the middle, and when I press, I'm going to go either straight up and down or back and forth, side to side. I will not be ironing at a diagonal. See how I'm doing this? This prevents the fibers from being torqued in a crossways direction. All right, now the fabric is all starched, and I'm going to place, my fusible woven closer to one end than the other, because the other I'm going to use as a binding strip on the project. And so I will place the designs just a little bit closer to one edge of the hoop rather than center, and that's intentionally done there. All right, and to put on the fusible woven, it just takes heat with no steam, and I will continue to do this until the fusible woven is completely adhered to the fabric. Okay, so now we have fusible woven to the back of the fabric. You can almost hear it. It sounds pretty stiff. It's great. This is the side that has more fabric without fusible woven. That's going to be the top of my hoop. I have a piece of poly mesh that I've already cut. I did the same thing. I just laid the hoop on it and cut it to size. And this particular piece was the very end of the roll. And it had a strip of glue on it. Can you see the yellow strip of glue right there? So this yellow strip of glue is very sticky, so I just took a scrap from another piece of poly mesh and just put it on there and covered the sticky part, because that's going to be probably up under the hoop anyway and won't even be seen, but that way I don't get shorted that extra 4 inches of poly mesh. So I'm going to put this here. I'm not really doing anything particularly special for the measuring. Let me open this up just a little bit more. Make sure I've got plenty of room to get all those layers in there. So let's see. Yeah, so this little glue area here is going to be like right in the hoop. And I just make sure that this is kind of even amount on all sides of the hoop. And I'm going to put in the first bit here. I've got a selvage, and this looks good. Yeah, that looks like that's good. Okay. And then I'm just going to push this down in. Great. That's good. Okay. I'm going to use my little brother screwdriver tool and tighten up these screws. Not super tight. You don't want it to crack, but get it tight enough so it's pretty good. Got good tension on it, and now I'm going to put in my T-pins. And you want to recess the hoop just a little bit. Push it with your thumbs, recess it just a little bit. Make sure that's down in there nice and tight. Okay, then I'm going to take this T-pin and I'm just going to put it in this crevice right here. It doesn't have to go up and over, but just push it in, and you want that head to be half on the hoop. If it comes back up out the other side, that's fine, but it doesn't have to. That's going to hold that from pulling it down under. Now that one came out. Great. Okay. That is tight, and that's not going anywhere. Okay, we're ready to go to the machine. One of the keys to success with this project is to be organized. And this is a thread tree. I've had this for years. I use it all the time. It actually has another, let me come down here a little bit. It actually has another stand that I could put right here that's a little shorter, but I don't really need it right now. So I'm just gonna leave, these are 10 spools that I have on. And the way I work this stand is to put on all of the threads that I'm going to use in a project, and then I run the threads up. And this little spring up here, they call it a thread cutter, which it will cut your thread, but one of the things that I do with it is I just tuck the tails up inside. Now, one of the things I've done with this one is I've taken a spreadsheet that I created because I wanted to determine which threads were going to be used the most often. And I'll probably be showing this in another video if you haven't seen it already. But one of the things that I'm doing with this is This spool number right here column is for the multi-needle when I finally load these threads over on the multi-needle. The color number is the number of the thread that I am going to use. These are all 13 spools. And one of the things I wanted to point out is the spool is numbered like it says SN1, but on the directions on the PDF it says 7005. And then I have in parentheses 1972 because neither SN1 or 7005 is found on the multi-needle, and I will be designating color 1972 on the multi-needle, but 7005 or SN1 will be on that particular spool. So I'm trying to stay organized with that because I'm going to be using different machines. Times used is the number of times that the color is used in all 32 tiles. So 15, which is white, and 20, which is black, are used in every one of the tiles. And so if this is the tile number, so 1, 2, 3, these are all the tiles. I have 3 pages of these, and it goes all the way through tile 32. All right. And then if a color is used in that, if this color is used, I put an X in the block. So this allows me to see how many times these are used, and I want the colors that are used the most to be closest to me because they're easier to work with, or in the case of the multi-needle, they'll be clustered in the back of the machine because I only have 10 needles on that and there are 13 colors in the design. The ones that are in yellow use some oddball colors that are rarely used, a metallic and a couple of others. The bottom 2 colors are only used in 2 of the tiles, and those are the brown colors that are used as part of the design. So what I have is I have all of these different colors on here, and I've put all of the other ones except for these 2 on here. And then also on my machine, on top of my machine, I have the white and the black. So those 2 are on there, and then here are more of the spools. Another thing I've done on this spreadsheet is I created a row for complete. So as I finish a particular tile, I will mark a little check mark or an X in that box. And down here, these are totals of the number of threads that are used in each one of the tiles. And there's only one tile, number 13, that uses 10 colors. So this has helped me to get real organized. And then another thing I did, because these colors are so incredibly similar. Let me zoom in. Because the colors are so incredibly similar, I took some paper tape and I wrote the number of the color, and so it's back here in the back. I put the color numbers, and I did that for all of them. I'm going to have the PDF document instructions at my side all the time when I'm stitching out these tiles, and I'll be sure to grab the right color that I need to when it comes time. I used paper tape so it's easy to peel off and it doesn't leave any kind of residue. So this took a little bit of time to set up, and this took a little bit of time to set up, but I think that in the end it's all going to be worth it, and it's going to keep me very organized so that I don't accidentally make a tile twice, which I'm sure can happen, and I don't grab the wrong thread color, or I shouldn't grab the wrong thread color. But all right, so I am ready to get started. I'll set my thread tree right behind the machine off to my right, and that way I know that the hoop is not going to bang into it at all. I have white and black on these 2, and then what I normally do is I will grab one of these from the back and I run it through this. When I'm finished with the white, I'll trim it close to the spool and let it lay on the ground, or the black will come up through this one. I run it through this first thread guide on the thread tree that's on the machine, and then I like to run it through this thread guide right here, which is actually designed for making bobbins, but my machine seems to be real happy. Let me use the white and see if you can see what I'm talking about. I will pop it through here. I don't use the little spool that makes the bobbins, but I do like the thread guide. And it just is a natural flow here from this thread guide over to number 1 for threading the machine. It just works a lot better. And to thread the machine, most machines will have a numbering system on them. You need to get your manual for your machine. Let me use the black. Maybe you can see it a little bit better. So I pop it through this, okay? And this is number 1, and on a brother or baby lock machine, it goes under number 1, and then you pull it around, and there are pictures that tell you how to do this. This machine has a thread stand in the back with vertical spools, and it also has a horizontal spool. It really depends on the machine, but I have found that brother machines, and I have a baby lock embroidery machine as well, they like to get their thread fed from the top, especially for spools that are cross wound like these are. This spool peg right here is great for garment sewing or other projects that are not embroidery. These spools are great for high-speed stitching, and these are great for, like I said, like garment sewing. So as you can see, it comes around, this is number 1, it comes around the back to number 2. I like to grab the thread back here from the top and pull this kind of taut at the bottom to make sure that the thread in this track right here, this first track closest to the center of the machine, is where the tension discs are. And so I like to make sure that that thread is down in the tension discs. And then the printed path says this is number 3, and it comes up. Number 4 is up and around. That is the take-up lever. And I do that and bring it down. And then number 5 comes down. There is a thread guide right here. This is number 5, it points to it. And 6 is right here on top of the needle. And I usually take my fingers and just kind of pop that in there, give it some tension. And sometimes it helps to put your finger here. And then there's like a little hat. It's a little flat disc looking thing. And there is also a little metallic hook looking thing. And I just pull it up over the little metallic thing so that the thread slides right into the hat brim, and the cutter is over here on this side, and I pull it and cut the thread. And then you can hit the auto threading button. And now the machine is threaded. When it comes time to change thread colors, what I normally do is trim close to the spool so that I don't have any kind of tail that can get hung up in the way or get caught up in or anything, especially for these two. Otherwise, I will cut it. Let's see where you can see. Otherwise, I'll cut it over here on this side of the thread stand. And I will take the end of the thread. Let me get this. It's kind of hard to see, like I said, because it's white. I'm just going to show you this the one time, okay? So I'll take both of these threads, put them together. I make a single loop and tie them through, pull both thread tails through, and just pull it into a little knot like that. That is a strong enough knot to handle what I'm about to do to it. And I make sure, you know, I've got enough thread here that it's got plenty of room. And then from the front of the machine, I grab in front of the needle and I just pull very slowly. Pull it very slowly, and here comes the knot. Okay, and once the knot has passed through thread guide number 6, I pull it up over into the brim of the little hat and tie it off, and then hit the threading button. And this makes sure that everything is flowing exactly the way it's supposed to, and it's very easy to do that, and I will do that for every single one of my thread changes, regardless of which machine I'm working on. So, all right, we are ready to get started. On the Brother Luminaire, and if you have a sewing and embroidery combo, you will have probably some options to choose when you first turn on the machine. The first one is sewing, we're not going to use that, and then this one has some Disney designs in it, and I'm not going to be using that. And then my design center is for digitizing, and I'm not going to be doing that today either. So today I'm just going to touch embroidery. In this screen, what you have here are some buttons that allow you to access designs that are already pre-programmed into the machine. And on every Brother, and I think Baby Locks as well, there is a little pocket. And the pocket is for memory. So I'm going to touch the pocket, and you can either access designs that are in the machine, USB. You might have your machine cabled to a laptop. On this machine, it will also take a little chip, and then these little radar waves here, those are the wireless options. And I sent the design wirelessly to the Luminaire using a utility feature in Brilliance Essentials embroidery software. So I'm going to touch wireless. Here it is right here. I titled it 08MNB. That's Merry and Bright. I'm going to choose 8 because I'm going to do square number 8. This one has quite a few thread changes, and it uses metallic thread, and so I wanted to use that one to use as a demo for this initial design stitch out. So let's look at what we've got on the screen here. On the top of the screen, we have some icons in the gray, and those are general to the machine as a whole. It tells you that the wireless function is working. You can use the camera function. The page has settings. You can do some video tutorials. You can change settings in these functions, and then there is a home button here. And then right here in this top area, there's a light gray line. And so in this top area, it tells you that right now the design is zoomed at 100%. If you wanted to get in closer, you could certainly touch that and zoom in quite a bit, and it would make it much larger. It's completely up to you, whatever you want to look at. And the hand means stop, and that is not activated right now because that's not a feature that we'll use with this particular design. There are 4 different possible hoop sizes that are available to this machine, and you can see the littlest one is grayed out. That's the 4x4. This one is the 5x7. This one's probably this is something akin to a 9x14 or a little larger, and this giant one right here is the 10x16. So what this is telling you is you can use any one of these 3 hoops to stitch out this one design. It's generally best to use the smallest hoop where the design will fit comfortably. That way you don't have a lot of play in all the fabric around it. And then it tells you that this design stitch out size is 6.69 inches by 4.23 inches. It has 5 color stop changes. Different, see the spool? That's a color change. You'll have 5 thread changes, and it's going to take 13 minutes to stitch out. This will give you some information about it if you want more, and then this will activate a camera scanning feature, and we're not going to be doing with that at all right now. Once you've got the design chosen from your list of choices, whether you pulled it out of the machine's memory or USB or you sent it wirelessly, you want to hit set. And now you're at a screen where essentially you can just touch embroidery and go. It is ready to go, but I'll explain to you what you've got on here. You can do edit. I'm going to touch the edit button, and this allows you to scale the size or move it around or rotate it. You can mirror it. There's all kinds of things you can do in here, and we're not going to do any of that, especially size. You do not want to edit the size of these designs, because then that's going to make the stitch lines off for when you get ready to sew these tiles together. So essentially, don't do anything with it at all. I'm going to touch edit again and make that go away. As I said earlier, there were 5 color stops in this particular design. Here's number 1, and it's going to run for 9 minutes. And then it's going to go to color 015, that's going to run 1 minute. Color 741 for 1 minute. It's going to run the white again, 015 for 1 minute, and then it's going to do the bounding box all the way around, and that is, it's not even going to take a minute, but that's the minimum time that it tells you on here that it's going to do. The directions tell you that this is color 0145, and so that's what I need to load into the machine right now, because that's going to be the very first stitch out. I'm going to touch the embroidery key. All right, and it looks like it is ready to go. So I'm going to do a thread change. So now what you can see here is just the stitch that's going to happen in this box. It shows you just the stitch that's going to happen, and it's going to take 9 minutes. And now up here on the top you can see there are 8,385 stitches, there are 5 color stops, and it's going to take 13 minutes. And it kind of gives you a color bar here so you can see what's going to be stitching and when. That's very handy. Another thing that's very handy, I'm going to point down here at the bottom of the screen. Nearly every embroidery machine has this. This is the needle plus minus button. This is very important, and it's very handy to have and know how to use it. In the needle plus minus button, if you do, let's say you have a thread break and you need to reload the thread and start over again. Some embroidery machines will just show -1 + 1, -10 + 10, maybe up to the values of 100. The luminaire goes up to 1,000 stitches at a time, where you can go forward or backward depending on which button you push. A lot of machines will have a little spool, and it will have a plus spool or a minus spool, and that's where you can jump ahead thread colors. So I'm going to hit the down arrow, and that's going to jump me to the next thread color. So watch what happens. Right now you can see this is the one that takes 9 minutes, and you can kind of see where it's got the crosshair to start, but if I hit the thread color jump, now you can see it's only going to be stitching these right here, and it's starting up here, these veins, okay? So you can jump around forward or backwards. See here, now it's the little gold ornament balls. So you can jump forward or backwards using a thread plus minus, and you can jump forward or backwards in your stitch counts with a stitch count plus or minus. So if you have a thread break, it is recommended that wherever the machine stopped, you want to go back 10 stitches. That's going to move the needle to usually to just before the break, and then it will create a new knot, and it will start again once you rethread the machine. If you have to go back more than 10, you can continue to press this button until you get to where the thread broke. or you ran out of bobbin, or whatever the case may be. These things happen. They happen frequently, and it's important that you know how to use that needle plus minus button in order to activate all of this and make that work for you. So I am going to touch OK, and we are ready to get started. So I'm going to turn the camera over to the machine, the bed of the machine area. And I have an Organ 7511 needle installed. It is an EBBR embroidery needle, and I have a black bobbin in here, and I need to change out my thread color to 0145 according to the instructions. And here's my hooped fabric, and it has the stabilizer, and it is backed with the fusible woven. And it's ready to go. I'm just going to tuck that under the needle and lock this down. I'm going to thread my needle, and it's ready to go. So all I have to do now is just press the green button and it will do its thing. And this is going to run for 9 minutes. So I'll let you watch a little bit. Now, let me stop. Let me get you in here and show you something. I don't know if you can see, but there's a tiny little loop right there. I don't want that. Sometimes the thread does not get pulled down in all the way, and that's okay. I have these little snips, and I have a pair of tweezers, and I'm going to hold that and pull it up from the bottom, and I'm just going to snip that off. There we go. You want to do that. Sometimes you'll have a tail or a little loop, and you want to do that so that the loop doesn't get, or the tail doesn't get pulled some other direction and cause some kind of wonky stuff. And then keep going. All right, that worked out just beautifully. And look, because we have got the fusible woven on the back, there's no puckers or anything in this design. Now, one thing I do want to point out, throughout the design, there were times when the machine stopped and then jumped to a new section to begin stitching again, and that is what is called a jump stitch. And if your machine does not automatically cut the jump stitches like mine does, so what I recommend you do is when you're watching the machine and you can hear it tying off and then it jumps to a new spot to begin stitching again, go ahead and let it begin to do the initial tie off to create the first knot, and then let it do a couple of stitches and then stop the machine and get in there and trim the jump thread with your scissors. That way you're not going to get the jump thread stitched underneath something that it shouldn't. But you really need to allow the machine to tie off from the last place that it wants to stop, and again tie off where it wants to start, let it go a little bit, and then trim that jump thread. All right, so now we need to do a thread color change to white. I'm going to trim this up here. I'm going to hold behind where I'm cutting, cut the thread, and then I'm going to put the tail back into the spring to keep it out of the way. And then here is the one that I just cut. I'm going to take my white thread again and tie it off. Pull it through from in front of the needle, get that little knot through, thread it, and go. I see a little trim needs to happen. Kind of hard to see on this. Pull this. This was probably a jump thread trim from before. There we go. So it left a bit of a tail there. I'm going to stop the machine. I'm going to raise the presser foot. Let me back out a little bit. So there are buttons here on the front of the machine. Let me show you. On the luminaire, this is the start button. Here's the reverse button. You only use that when you're sewing. This is a button to make a knot, which I'm not going to use during this process at all. Needle up, needle down, my thread cutter, and my presser foot up and down. This is a speed button. This button doesn't matter when you're in the embroidery mode. This is only for sewing, and then your needle threader. So I need to get to a little tail that wasn't pulled down to the back, so I'm going to raise the presser foot. I'm going to grab a hold of this again, pull that up taut, and trim. Okay. And on this model, this is the XP2. On this model, I don't have to put the presser foot down before I start. On my old Quattro, every time I have to put the presser foot down in order for this red light to turn green. So it completely depends on the model of machine that you're working on. If you have an XP1, you have to put the presser foot down. If you have the XP2, you do not. Color change back to white. And a color change to black. One down, 31 to go. Gonna remove the hoop from the machine. Oh, that just turned out absolutely gorgeous. Look at that, not a pucker in sight. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, let's get it out of the hoop. Okay, so I'm gonna pop it out of the hoop. Might have to use the screwdriver, but you shouldn't have to. I got a little bit of hoop burn on here, which is fine. I'm gonna get rid of that. That's probably going to happen on every one of these, but this hoop burn it doesn't matter because we're going to trim these to 1/2 inch each one of these tiles. But where it does matter is right here, because I'm going to hoop right here again. So I'm just going to flip it over to the back and fold this back, and then this is Mary Ellen's Best Pressed in here, so it has a fabric fiber relaxer in it. You can already see it's already dropping out. I'm ironing it from the back. That's going to prevent any kind of shiny anything on the front. Okay. That looks good. There. This looks great. Very important. A chalk marker, very important. This is tile. I'm going to put it out here kind of in the seam allowance, so when I trim it, I still know what number it is. It doesn't matter where in the seam allowance, you don't want to go over the black line, but I am going to put number 8, and that way I know which one it is. Now I want to hoop again. I'm going to cut another piece of stabilizer, and you want to make sure that because we're going to trim these at 1/2 inch, you want to make sure that you have got about 2 inches between. Okay, I'm conserving fabric. I don't want to have to spend loads on fabric, and so I'm just going to put this under here. I'm going to fold this back, put this right here, make sure I've got 2 inches between, and then fold this back over, and make sure that you've got enough fabric to have a successful hooping. Put your stabilizer, everything's fine. I know my distance is fine right here. I'm going to trim in between with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Hooping it again, just like that. Pop that down in, recess it just a tad on all 4 corners, flip this up, and tighten it up. There. And we are ready to go for hooping. When it's all said and done, I am going to be using, once these are trimmed and cut and everything, if necessary, if there's any kind of bubbles or something, you can always use a clapper. This is a tailor's press, and you can on the back, I would go ahead and put some heat on it. I don't recommend steam. You can try it, and then put this on there, and that's going to really make it nice and flat. So. But that's later on down the line. So, all right, time to start another design.